It's time for some Type 40, extra Type 40 video exclusive content with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. Welcome back to the channel. This is where we scroll the view screen for the sights and sounds of the Hooniverse, those fixed and not so fixed of talking points. Type 40 Extra is an after show, but it's also a before show and an in-between show too, in between all the live streams and podcasts and everything else that we do. Time to take stock, time to catch up even. It all depends on who's calling. And who's calling this time? Who's calling this time? I hear you cry. Yes, you. Yes. Well, I'm happy to say it's only friend of the channel, massive Doctor Who fan and author of the very well-reviewed Doctor Who audiobook, The Resurrection Planet. Yes, of course it is. It's Will Hadcroft again.
Greetings.
Greetings. So you're back and it's about time and all that, isn't it?
It is indeed. Well overdue.
Well, yeah, not only are you back, but you're back, aren't you? You've got a brand new Doctor Who story of your own to tell us, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Dark Contract. Not far away now from release. Very exciting.
This very month, and Will is here to preview it just for us here at Type 40. You look excited. You're all smiles. That can't just be you're talking to me again after a couple of months. It must be because it's nearly here. You've worked on this thing for how long?
Yeah, well, when was it commissioned? It was commissioned shortly after Resurrection Planet came out. So good 18 months, 2 years. When did that come out? It came out August 2022, yeah. So it would have been a month or so after that that they asked me to do another. And the producer, Michael Stevens, said Fifth Doctor and Adric. That was his requirement. And that came to me via John Ainsworth, the project editor. So I said, well, does he mean just the Fifth Doctor and Adric without the ladies? And he said, I think he means the whole season 19 setup. So I got to work on suggesting stories that would fit those characters and that would work. And we went for the one that became Dark Contract. Yeah. Until it's come out and a few folk have heard it, I can't tell you the original title because it kind of gives the game away a bit. But they said to me, you can't call it that because if anybody knows what that means, then it explains the story to them before they've heard it. So I said, well, John, what would you call it then? And he gave me 3 titles, and one of them was Dark Contract. And I said, let's go with that. And I think it sounds great. It sounds mysterious.
It's a fantastic title.
Enticing, doesn't it? So
it does sound enticing, as any trip in the TARDIS should do. 1982 was a very precise time in the series' history, wasn't it? In the development of Doctor Who, coming out of the long, woolly, curly shadow of Tom Baker. There was uncertainty in the air for a little while, but it didn't really last long, did it? And 1982 was generally quite an exciting year for pop culture, wasn't it? It did feel like everything that was old was new again, and science fiction was really back in vogue, wasn't it? Sort of proper science fiction, the kind that Christopher H. Bidmead favoured so much, and that kind of the magical fantasy aspect personified by this little fella here. So no, it's not Sylvester McCoy. This you put your contacts in. Yes, do you remember him? Do you remember E.T.?
Of course, an adorable film. I'm always surprised when some people say that they don't like it. I think it's got everything going for it.
Yeah.
A lovely family film with a lovely moral and a good heart to it. And I can see why some people might find the E.T. alien scary rather than cuddly, because it does have a face that you could take as hideous or friendly. I think I always saw him as friendly and cute, and fell in love with the whole thing as many did back then. Yeah, a massive film that. Yeah, not seen it for a long time. But
I haven't, and I wouldn't trust anybody, quite frankly, who said they didn't like E.T. But it was a great time for cinema, and it was a time of renewal very much for television as well. A lot of old favourites on the BBC were getting a bit of a tune-up, weren't they? And Doctor Who was no exception. A big change in the lead actor like that transition from Tom Baker to Peter Davison. So when the proposition was put to you to go back, to transport yourself back to this time, to tell a new story with the Doctor Who cast, the characters and the flavour of 1982, did you need to go back over any of the old material, or was it all already there in the memory bank of the old big grey hard drive?
Well, when I discussed it with my wife, she said, "Well, of course you've seen this stuff a million times. You know, you don't need to watch it all again, do you?" And I thought, well, I think I do. I mean, it's any excuse, really, isn't it? But I thought I will watch season 19 again. I've just got hold of the Blu-ray as well, so able to watch it in pristine condition and watch all the extra stuff as well. But just to get the feel of what that ensemble cast was like and what the characters were like, and to think about the characters as well. Think about who they are, what motivates them, how they work as a group. It was a really interesting exercise, actually, because I was studying it closely this time. I kind of had a deeper appreciation, even for time flight. There was, and for to Doomsday, it never really did anything for me on the original broadcast. And then when it came out on VHS, I couldn't get through it. But for some reason, this time round, probably because I was psyched up and motivated to do this story. I found that I really enjoyed For to Doomsday this time. So it's actually enhanced my appreciation of the season, doing it for research purposes.
Because it's a smaller window, isn't it, that those four characters are together. They don't even make it all the way through season 19, do they? Spoilers for the 40-odd-year-old piece of television out there who hasn't got the box set yet. But, you're quite right. When I look back to this time, even though they didn't change their clothes quite so frequently, the characters do develop. I think the way that Peter plays the Doctor and the way that people write his Doctor is very different in that first season compared to how it is in the last one. And his relationship with Tegan as well, which I think that people do boil down to a bit of a caricature. I think that does develop really quite subtly. So I know what you mean. Yeah.
I really like the idea that Tegan really just got dragged into it in Logopolis. She would want to then, once it's over and done with, she would want to go back home, wouldn't she? It was nice to have a character who didn't go, "Oh, I want to run away from my life and go on adventures with you." She didn't want to run away. She wanted to go back and go back to her job. And, as mundane and as boring as it might sound to the rest of us who do want to run away in the TARDIS, it was interesting to play it that way, that she doesn't want to be there.
Because that job was her ambition, and she'd probably worked very hard to get to that position.
Yeah.
And wanted to begin to live the life that she'd worked hard for.
Yeah. And I liked, I've always loved that scene at the beginning of The Visitation where she walks into the console room and sees the image on the scanner and says, "Is that meant to be Heathrow?" And Adric says, it is. And she says, "Well, they certainly let the grass grow since the last time I was there." And then there's that big row. And the Doctor nervously fiddling with that control, and it comes off in his hand because he's so nervous. The comedy of it, I thought, I've got to do something with this.
Oh, fabulous.
So I turn it on its head in Dark Contract. There's a similar scene, but I turn it on its head.
I can't wait. You're really whetting my appetite already. So this is Doctor Who Dark Contract by Will Hadcroft, and the blurb on the back of this release and over on the various websites that's listed at says this. It says, when the TARDIS lands on Earth in the 1830s, Tegan is keen to explore Dickensian London. The grim realities of poverty and destitution are sobering, with conditions exacerbated by the new Poor Law. Yet something else is affecting those most in need, something not of this world. The beings who have formed a deadly contract with the people of Earth, the presence of TARDIS travellers in London is inconvenient to say the least. Dark Contract is released on the 18th of July 2024 on audio CD, and obviously, Will, I don't want any actual spoilers, but I know there are some things you can tell us about. But the process behind it is really, really fascinating. This is my Doctor. This is the sweet spot for me. No pressure, obviously. So I can't wait to hear you and Matthew Waterhouse, who's reading this, bring it to life for me.
I can't wait either. I mean, it's the same crew that did Resurrection Plant, so it's the same editor and producer. It's the same sound designer, David Rucroft. Now, we know what a grand job he did at the Resurrection Plant. All
sounded
those,
amazing.
Industrial sounds in the background and everything. Now, this is set in Dickensian England, so we know David's going to pull it out the bag, don't we? You know, just based on the Resurrection Plant. So I can't wait to hear what he's done with this. Matthew reading it, I've heard one or two other things he's read, so I know how that's going to sound. And then, of course, it's top and tail with the Peter Howell theme music. You know, when I was a young teen, I used to imagine my name on the opening credits of the Peter Davison titles, imagining myself to be a writer of Doctor Who. So this is it, man. You know, it's the nearest I'm going to get to a Peter Davison Doctor Who, and my name is on the credits, so to speak.
This is one of the range of BBC audio originals. The stories that are told in this line, we've spoken about this before, are very particular, aren't they? They can be quite intimate, and it's not like Big Finish where it's a full cast audio drama. But there's a whole line of these that have been going for some time, hasn't it? The Resurrection Plant is a particularly memorable entry into this line of stories. So I've every confidence that you're as versed in season 19 of Doctor Who as anybody could ever be. But how about Dickensian London? You know, are you a fan of Dickens, for example? Are you a historian?
No, I'm not. But I do like the flavour of it. Do like the way it sounds and looks when it's dramatized. And in 2006, I think it was 5 or 6, the BBC had done an adaptation of Bleak House by Andrew Davis.
I remember.
And it was done in like a soap opera, half-hour episodes across a number of weeks. So this was a big show, you know, and I got really hooked on it at the time. So when I got set on the idea of the new poor law, and the idea of workhouses and people who are, you know, there's a lot of unemployment and starvation, and so they come up with this idea of just bung everybody in these workhouses, and that's how they will get by, and the harshness of it and the cruelty of it. So I did some research on the new poor law, and then I remembered that Bleak House dramatization. So I thought, I'm going to rewatch that because I need to get the rhythm of the speech, the way Dickensian characters are and the way they speak to one another. Because
there's a particular flavour, and it's a shame. It's a shame not to lean into that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it works very well for Doctor Who, that kind of setting. I'm quite a traditionalist, really, as a fan. I feel that there are certain kinds of stories that work very well for Doctor Who, and the more experimental type are hit and miss. And sometimes the sort of radical experimental types really work, and you go, hey, that was great. That was not the usual thing, but it worked. And then other times it's an absolute disaster, and you're thinking, what on earth did they do this for?
What were they thinking? Yeah.
And I'm not going to start going into which ones are like that, according to my opinion. But there are certain. It's like, you know, like with the Pyramids of Mars, where Tom Baker says Egyptology is really good for Doctor Who, and that there are a number of styles and tones and settings and characters and that really do work well in the format. So I thought Dickensian London is a winner. You know, you can't get it wrong unless you really try hard, you know. So and then I started thinking of names, the sort of names that Dickens comes up with. I mean, we my wife and I, we were driving around. We were going to an old mill that's been turned into like a shopping centre type of thing, and it was near in West Orton or Wigan, can't remember now, but it's near Flapperfold Lane. And I saw Flapperfold Lane, and I just said to my wife, "Look at that! That sounds right out of Dickens." So there's a character in Dark Contract called Mr. Flapperfold, and that's where I got it from. So once I was set on doing it, I was looking all the time, alerts all the time for things that I could use and put in that would feel authentic.
It is. That does sound very Chuzzlewit, doesn't it? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's another one. There's clergyman in it called Father Flannel. And I got that from a friend of mine years ago who knew a clergyman called Father Flannery. And my friend thought he was a bit of a fraud and always called him Father Flannel. So I thought, well, that sounds rather Dickensian. So there's a Father Flannel in it as well.
See, what I love about talking to you is the fact that you relish writing, and the joy is evident all over your face.
It is a joyful thing to create a world and create characters and a situation, and then drop them into it and see how they go on in that situation. And then you've got the Doctor Who characters who you've known from, your childhood up and you love, and to sort of play with those really. And I mean, things like, there are certain things that I've always thought about those characters that were never quite explored in the television series. But the fact that Nyssa, there's a line in Castrovalva where the Master is chuckling on the screen of the scanner, he's sending them off into Event 1, and she says, "I hate that face," and turns the scanner off. And it's always struck me that that's the face of her own father.
Yeah.
Which is never alluded to again. He killed her father, and every time she sees the Master, she's looking at her own dad, and it's never referred to again. So there are things that, this is all sort of fanboyish stuff, I suppose, that we do think about these things more deeply than the script writers did at the time.
No, I always have, and I've always latched onto those moments as well, particularly from the 80s companions, because those are the ones that I grew up with. I can imagine what a thrill it is to have characters that you know inside out, better than anybody else because you've created them, interacting with these icons, with these cozy characters, this Doctor Who family. Yeah.
And what's great is that, I don't think he'll mind me saying it, John Ainsworth, my editor, after we finished with the final draft of it, he said that I had absolutely nailed it, the season 19 ensemble. So that's lovely to know. I thought I'd got it right, but it's nice to be told that I have,
Yeah.
The way they are, the way they behave, the way they speak to one another, their relationships with one another, and how they behave when they're separated from one another. It's authentic.
It is. I can imagine somebody who knows the one character in particular inside out, and I'd say the other three pretty well, is Mr. Matthew Waterhouse. So when you discovered that Matthew was going to be reading this, whoever they were going to choose, I would imagine it would be a thrill. But Matthew in particular, obviously being the age that he was then, and being such a fabulous sport and such an active member of the Doctor Who community, the Doctor Who family now, that must have been really lovely too.
Well, it's I hesitate to say it's come full circle. To quote Dexter, it's come full circle. But it has, because a lot of Doctor Who fans of your generation, when Adric died, my word. And I remember my dad who used to say every time Adric came on, he'd go, it wouldn't take too long before he'd go, "I hate that kid." And it used to be like a wound every time he said it, because to me, Adric was a hero. Adric was the outsider, He was the person who didn't belong. He didn't belong on his own planet. He didn't belong with the Doctor after the regeneration, really. He belonged with the Tom Baker incarnation and Romana. He seemed to fit there. And even in Keeper of Track, and when it was just a Doctor and Adric, that worked. He was like a sort of father figure to him. But once the regeneration occurred, the whole nature of the relationship changed. And then with the addition of Tegan and Nissa, and so in the end, he didn't belong with the doctor either. And because I was struggling after the transition to secondary school, I was struggling to fit and didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I really latched onto Adric. And also, I could barely remember Harry, who was the last male companion. I could barely remember him. So that
was a big gap, wasn't it, in between Harry and Adric? Now you mention it.
Yeah, this boy, he was mine in that sense. That there was a companion in here who I could relate to as a boy. So when he was blown up, my word, I was devastated. It was as though someone I knew had died.
A school friend or something like that. It was it was kind of like when that kid Jeremy drowned in Grange Hill. It was one of those moments.
40 years later, you write the story with that character in, and then the actor who played him on television is reading the story. It means a great deal to me that it's Matthew reading it.
Have you had any feedback from Matthew yet?
I haven't heard a peep out of him, but I hope he had a good time reading it, and I can't wait to hear what he's done.
Because obviously he's a writer himself as well, isn't he? Yeah, excellent stuff. Yes, so we've talked a little about the story. We know about the cast. When it comes to the technical aspects to a production like this, though, obviously, you can't. I would imagine that you would if you could, because you are a musician as well, aren't you? You've written music, you sing, you do all these other things too. I'd imagine that you probably have an idea in your head how it may sound, but it does seem to me that you relish the fact that other people are going to come in and bring it to life in that respect.
Yeah. You can't be precious about the production side of it. There are very talented people who are very good at what they do, and you just hand it over to them, really, and trust them that they're going to do a grand job of it. As far as, I wouldn't say I was a musician in the sense that I can play a musical instrument very well. I can arrange sounds. I've got keyboard, I've got sound mixing gear, I can compose a tune, I can write a lyric, I can just about carry a note. So I do write songs, and I've always been interested in incidental music. It's all, a lot of us are, aren't we, Doctor Who fans? We're very interested in the incidental music and the composers and the Radiophonic Workshop and Dudley Simpson and so on and so on. So, and we're aware of sound effects. I won the Doctor Who sound effects record when I was 10.
I remember you telling me.
Ran that competition. I was one of 100 winners. So I was making my own Doctor Who stories with a cassette recorder and that record and the theme music single, and trying to rope in friends to play different parts. And if no one would cooperate, I did them all myself. I was talking to myself in different voices, making these little plays. So doing that at age 10 and 11, and then fast forward to, I'm 54 now. I'm very keen on how it will sound and how it will be realized. So when I'm writing it, I'm thinking of how it might be realized. So when you describe backgrounds and the sounds of a background in the close, the sound designer is likely to pick up on certain parts of what you're describing and realize them with a sound effect or two. So I know what's in the story. I know what happens. I know the setting. So I know certain things are likely to crop up. I mean, I talk about the clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobbles. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's there in the background, when that's read out.
And obviously, because I don't have any of those skills at all as regards music, but when I see design, when I see illustration, because that's my field, I am looking for clues in the cover artwork as to where this story could go. This artwork's by Lee Johnson, isn't it, for Dark Contract? And there's lots of little details here, sort of, what does that pub sign say? What on earth is Adric holding? And what is that on the right-hand side that seems to be coming out of the smoke and the lightning? So it's very evocative. The Doctor looks somewhat indignant, doesn't he? But this is fabulous. It really does stoke the boiler, ready for dark contracts. Yeah, I bet you're thrilled with this too.
Absolutely. When it came through, John sent me a copy of that without the logo and everything on it. To say, this is what it's looking like at the moment. I thought you might like to see it. My word. No disrespect to the designer of the Resurrection Plant cover, but this is something else again, isn't it? And
Next level. Yeah.
They seem to be going with Lee Johnson. Seem to have been going with Lee Johnson since the beginning of the year. Because I noticed the Gary Russell one, The Demons Within, is clearly the same artist, and a few of the other covers for the audio originals. So they've clearly took Lee on. I think Lee was doing covers for Big Finish, and as John Ainsworth is associated with them, recommended Lee to the producer Michael Stevens.
No, I think continuity is very important. Continuity and identity are really important to a line like this. And when it's attracting the kind of talent that it does to write them, Justin Richards, Paul Mars, yourself, and the people that get to read them, then yeah, I think that it's right that the artwork, the presentation of it looks in a way that befits that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some quite striking covers there. What you've just shown. Yeah. So they're obviously using different artists and different designers, and chopping and changing. But Lee Johnson it's absolutely stunning, that cover he did for Dark Contract. I couldn't believe it when I was presented with it. I mean, that pub sign, the Man and Scythe.
Yeah.
And then you've got the old London town on the left, and then you've got the other thing, which I won't go into, on the right.
Yeah.
And indeed, what is that device that Adric is holding? Yeah. So
you little tinker. You see, for me, this stuff, even though it's the other way around, so the logo's at the bottom rather than the top, this is absolutely in the spirit of the old Target books, which I know that you loved as much as I did.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the Resurrection Plant again, when I call it the Jodie logo, when that logo was on, it was nice that it's the official Doctor Who logo. I finally got a piece of work out with the BBC logo and Doctor Who logo as it appears on television. But in my heart, it's the diamond logo or the neon logo, really. The two important ones from my youth.
My too.
So to have that diamond, the logo without the diamond, but that particular 1970s logo from Bernard Lodge on a product of mine, that's lovely. Yeah. It really hits the spot. It ticks the box. It's, dream come true stuff again.
And it's nearly time. Doctor Who Dark Contract is available for pre-order right now, isn't it? So it's out on Thursday, the 18th of July, 2024 from BBC Audio Originals, but you can order it now. There'll be some links in the description to this video too, so you can get over there and have at it.
Absolutely. You can get it as a CD or as a download, depending on your preference. I always like a physical product, so CDs for me every time.
Me too. You must agree, though, to sign mine for me, Will, at the nearest available opportunity, which could well be in the not too distant future, because you're there at Hooverville 15.
Absolutely.
At Quad in Derby again, aren't you?
I am indeed. I'll be there. So if anyone's purchased it in advance, just bring the cover with you. I'll sign the cover. Or I'll have a few discs to hand myself. You can get one off me while you're there.
Fantastic stuff.
Anything for anyone within reason.
No body parts or anything like that, everybody. Just get your CDs, get them to Will Hadcroft, and he'll sign them. That's on Saturday, the 31st of August, 2024 at Quad in Derby, and Type 40 will be there covering the event. So duck and cover, fellow guests. I think you'll probably be behind a desk, won't you? I'm sure we'll manage to get you, but some of the others are going to have to move pretty damn quickly to not get caught in the Type 40 trap.
I'll be behind a desk for some of it, wandering around for other parts of it. If I'm not at my desk, I'm watching a panel that I really want to watch, and then
That's it. Yeah. That's it. Get it sorted. Obviously, the Resurrection Plant is also still available. If they're one of the very few Doctor Who fans who haven't heard this yet, this is still available at all the usual outlets as well, isn't it, Will?
It is. It is. And if you're into, the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, and you're into the mythology of Time Lords, the fact that in 1969, prior to the War Games, we didn't know the Doctor was a Time Lord. We didn't know where he came from. We didn't know what he was. And so in this story, I'm playing around with that, really, that the Doctor comes across a situation and he knows what's going on and who's doing it, and doesn't really want to share that knowledge with anybody, not even Jamie and Zoe, because, in that time of his life, he didn't want to reveal what he was. So I play around with that in the resurrection plan. So if that's your bag, go and get it.
And the Doctor always knows what's going on, doesn't he? Well, apart from when he doesn't.
You're watching Type 40.
One more time, Doctor Who Dark Contract by Will Hadcroft, read by Matthew Waterhouse. It's going to be released on Thursday, the 18th of July 2024 from BBC Audio Originals. You can pre-order it now. There's links in the description. I've been lucky enough to get the tasty preview here with Will Hadcroft himself, and I can't wait to get this CD in my life. I go physical every single time. I know that sounded wrong. Don't tell the arresting officer that I said that. I go with physical media every time too, so I can't wait to add this to my collection, Will. And congratulations again, simply for getting another story out there. I would imagine you have some others churning around in your head as well now the engine's started up. But savour this, my friend, and I can't wait.
I've got plenty of ideas. It's whether or not they want them, really. I've got a great idea for a 6th Doctor one, but at the end of the day, I have to wait for them to ask me, and then they might not want 6th Doctor. They might want something else. So, I can't go in there dictating things or anything like that. I have to wait to be asked. So if they ask, there is plenty more. Plenty more where that came from. And there's plenty more where this came from too. So Will and I went in depth, didn't we, on the Resurrection Plant on the podcast. This is a few months ago now. A fabulous edition of the show, even if I say so myself. We found out all about it. It wasn't just a preview. Will gave us the inside track on how he brought this entire story to life. So once you get that CD in your life, if you haven't heard it, you can get our podcast in your ears as well too. Nearly there. Dark Contract is on the way. Will, thank you so much for coming in to tell us about this. I've been counting down the weeks for a little while now, and I'm just as thrilled for you as I am going to be for myself when I get to hear Dark Contract. No, thanks very much, Dan. Thanks for having me back. It's been a joy to talk about it.
And over to you in the comments. Have you any questions or queries here for Will about Dark Contract, the Resurrection Plant, about writing or anything else? You can hit us up in the comments with all of that. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.